I'm going to share with you some things that I've found useful when embroidering. When there's a decorative top, I don't like to stitch over top of the decorations. So I frequently use clear plastic thread in my needle and decorative thread in my bobbin, and I mean embroidery thread. When I use embroidery thread in my bobbin, I never change the bobbin case from regular to embroidery bobbin case in the sewing machine. When I use clear plastic thread, I use metallic needles because that seems to work very well with it. And if needed, I always use a cone feeder. If you don't have one on your machine, just invest a couple dollars in one. You'll use it again and again. It's a great way to have cones feed and not clog up your machine as you sew. Here's one of my favorite tricks. I hoop sticky with the paper on. And then I know you think this sounds a little nutty because you're thinking I'll have to wash away all that sticky or pull it out with tweezers. But stay tuned, I have a really great way of handling that. We're at my sewing machine bed, and I'm going to start by stitching a basting stitch in a square shape without having removed any of the paper backing from the sticky. So you'll see what happens next. And it's a basting stitch. It's kind of an outline stitch. All of my embroideries come with this outline stitch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the sticky away just inside the stitching line, and then I'm going to position my fabric in the hoop, and there will be nothing behind it, but there will be sticky all around to hold the piece of fabric in place. And if I go back to the beginning of my embroidery pattern, I will again stitch a basting stitch that will hold it in place. So let's go see how that looks. Here's the embroidery hoop with the stitching in place. I'm going to use paper scissors to cut just inside the line that I just sewed. And you can hang on to that little bit of sticky and use it again because the paper's still attached to it. When I've done that, I'm going to remove the orange thread, or whatever color thread you have there, and I'm going to rip back the sticky. Some people score their sticky with a pin just to make it easier to break that layer away. I don't really mind that this has ripped all the way back to the edge of the hoop. I was just trying to protect my hoop from sticky so I didn't have to wash it. If you just want to put your sticky on the back of your hoop, that's fine too. I'm back at the sewing machine. I'm in the start position, and I brought my embroidery all the way back to the very beginning. I'm going to line up my cross marks so they are underneath the needle. And then when that's done, you could choose to do your basting stitch again, which I like to do. That holds the fabric to the sticky. Or you could just add your topping and then go ahead and embroider. So that's about center. What I do then is I press that down so that my back sits in the sticky frame that I've created. Then I hold on to my thread tail and I move my needle to the first stitch. That's right here. It's the basting stitch. If you're going to have any problems with the sticky, you'll see it then. I'm just tightening that up a bit. Okay. So what I like to do personally is I like to take one stitch and then bring up the bobbin thread. If I can. There's the bobbin thread. And my bobbin is decorative because I'm testing this out. So now I'm just going to go ahead and do the basting stitch. Next, I'm going to pull out my top thread and keep moving my piece so that it's back to the beginning of the decorative part of this design. Begin at the very center. It's okay as long as I lined up these cross marks at the very beginning. Then I slide my fabric underneath the needle, make sure it sits so that it's positioned kind of centered between the stitching lines. And then I'm going to sew the next design. I do one more thing that's unusual. I bring my needle down and up, and this way I can bring the bobbin thread to this side. I do that because sometimes the bobbin thread winds around on the back as I'm sewing, and then I get to clean up a bit of a mess. So now I'm ready to sew my design. Remember, the orange thread would be clear plastic normally. I have gold thread in the bobbin, so that'll be the decorative part of this product. This is the embroidery on the wrong side. Normally this would be clear plastic thread. This is the side that will be visible on the outside of the quilt when it's constructed. Notice there's a lot of orange showing. Before I actually sew this, because this was going to be my sample, I'm going to adjust the tension. When I use clear plastic thread, a lot of times I put net on it to control it, and that net causes a little more tension on that clear plastic thread than regular thread. Because of that quality, I usually test all my samples with clear plastic thread before I sew them.